for our speaker today, Dr. Rajni Kaushik. Dr. Kaushik is principal microbiologist who leads the ISO 30500 training manual development and is in charge of the evaluation of test methods and capability building of laboratories in Senegal. Dr. Kaushik has a PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the National University of Singapore and has carried out postdoctoral research at the Singapore MIT Alliance for Research and Technology. She is a consultant for environmental microbiology, sanitation, and product testing against microbial pathogens. Previously, Dr. Kaushik worked on R&D and Unilever and holds a patent on improved detergent composition for antimicrobial benefits. So, on that note, I will hand over the presentation to Dr. Kaushik, who will start with the introduction to the topic. Over to you.
Thanks, Meenal, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Today, I'm here to present to you on how standardization can be used as a powerful tool to pave way for innovative technologies in order to safeguard human health from infectious diseases through ISO 3500, which is a technical standard for non-sewered sanitation systems. Thus, the purpose of this presentation are twofold. One is to share details on human health parameter requirements of ISO 3500, and secondly, to highlight how forward-looking standards can be a way to rethink conventional standardization process. To achieve this, first, I will talk about why the need for ISO 3500 and its link to infectious diseases, followed by which I will share with you the human health parameters requirement as per the standard, after which I will share the threshold and the rationale behind setting these parameters requirements, followed by which I will also share with you where, when, and how to test for these human health parameters. And finally, I would like to also highlight who all could benefit from this ISO 3500. So let's start. To start with, I would like to bring your attention to the global sanitation crisis we are facing for over many years now. And time and again, the need for urgent measures towards this problem gets spotlight due to its inherent connection to preventable diseases. Various epidemiological studies analyzing the past epidemics have also identified poor sanitation and hygiene as primary drivers that cause rapid spread of diseases. And this is true even in today's scenario of COVID-19, which highlights a strong correlation between lack of sanitation and increase to human health risk, as shown in these news articles here. Many countries, especially Asian countries, are at increased risk to diseases as a result of inadequate access to sanitation. This sanitation crisis is mainly due to poor fecal sludge management, where only 2% of the fecal sludge is safely treated and disposed of, and 98% still remains untreated and gets unsafely disposed or discharged into receiving waters, thereby polluting our environment. This 98% unsafe disposal creates a lot of water and wastewater challenges for treatment plants. For this, a lot of attention and work has been done in the area of drinking water quality and standards. However, limited standards exist on sanitation or fecal sludge treatment, which is actually the root cause of the problem, thereby doing very little for waste management, especially in non-sewered sanitation sector. This is a major concern for both the environment as well as the public health, as poor sanitation is linked to transmission of various infectious diseases like cholera, dysentery, diarrhea. Diarrheal diseases being the largest contributor of global burden of disease, especially for children under the age of 5. Here, I would also like to share some positive side of the studies where a simple intervention of providing a household with a toilet helped to reduce diarrheal episodes as well as improve the baseline sanitation conditions in the community. As I speak, 2.4 billion people still lack improved sanitation. And open defecation is still a reality, especially in underdeveloped countries, highlighting that we have a long way to go. This global problem of waste management provided the need for development of ISO 3500 and motivated towards its publication as a step forward. As we now understand why the need for ISO 3500 standard, let's now dive into what is in ISO 3500. As discussed by my colleagues in the first webinar of this series, titled Overview to ISO 3500, where my colleagues shared the different test requirements as per ISO 3500. Today, I will present to you on the human health parameter requirements in detail. Here, I would also like to highlight that some of you might have missed the first webinar. Please note that each webinar in this series is recorded. So you can request and get in touch with us for any of the recordings you would like to have. So let's move on to which are the human health test parameters required to be tested for ISO 3500. We have 4 different parameters representing the major microbial pathogens which are found in sludges or fecal waste. And these are enteric bacteria, enteric virus, protozoa, and helminths. So let's start with enteric bacteria. These bacteria are the bacteria which reside in the intestine of animals and are associated with the fecal contamination of food and water. The surrogate for enteric bacteria mostly is E. coli, which is also part of our normal gut microbiome. That means it is normally present in our body. However, under certain conditions, it can turn into an opportunistic pathogen. E. coli can survive under ideal condition and can easily be cultured in any laboratory and detected as shown in the picture here on the right hand side. It is also mostly recommended as the fecal indicator of choice by WHO as well as many other international guidelines. It came into picture as a pathogen due to its role in hemorrhagic enteritis, which is also commonly known as bloody diarrhea. And the strain associated, E. coli 0157H7, was associated with many of the disease outbreaks due to ingestion of food or water contaminated with feces. With that, let's move on to the next category, which is enteric viruses. Viruses are the most prevalent and hazardous microbial pathogens, where more than 150 types of enteric viruses are excreted in human feces. Many of these causes gastrointestinal diseases. Coliphages are found to be the model indicators for enteric viruses. They are well reviewed and studied in municipal sludges as the model organisms. This is due to their high prevalence as well as physical similarity to enteric viruses. They also have similar response to treatment processes like enteric viruses. So MS2 and somatic coliphages are the surrogates suggested for fecal contamination, as they are also easy to concentrate and analyze in samples. With that, let's move on to protozoan pathogens. Protozoan pathogens are the second most common cause of mortality among children under the age of 5. There are 2 protozoa commonly associated with outbreaks. This is Giardia, causing giardiasis, Cryptosporidium pavum, causing cryptosporidiasis. They live in wide range of animals in the tropozoid form in the intestine and later shed as cysts. These cysts are found in both untreated as well as treated surface waters. And 60% of people living near pit latrines were found to be infected with either Giardia or Cryptosporidium. Clostridium perfringens spores are well studied as surrogates for protozoa. WHO also suggests the spores of this anaerobic bacteria as surrogate, since they are highly resistant in the environment and respond quite similarly to the treatment processes. With that, let's come to the last category of pathogen, which is helminth. Helminth are large multicellular organisms which can be seen by our naked eye. 1 billion people worldwide are infected with helminth, especially in the underdeveloped countries. They are the most resistant form of microbial pathogens and can survive long period of time outside the host body. About 80% of the helminth infections are due to Ascaris lumbricoides, which is a human enteric helminth. The major challenge with Ascaris is its testing for viability assay, as well as the procurement of its viable eggs for testing. With that, let's move on to what are the thresholds which are required as per the standard for these parameters and the rationale for testing these human health requirements. In ISO, there are two types of requirements. One is the maximum concentration in dry solids, and second is the log reduction values. So for both requirements, solid and liquid output needs to be tested and needs to be expressed as per grams dry solid basis, and for liquid it is per liter basis. Table 4 and 5 in ISO 3500 refers to these threshold values, which needs to be met by the treatment technology to be certified by any certification body. For the calculation of log reduction value, which is the log input numbers minus the log output number, you need to first meet the spiking requirements as per table 8.4, whereby the fecal waste, which has the natural level of contamination, needs to be spiked with additional numbers of microbes to meet the input load as here in table A4 for each of the 4 categories of the human health parameters. The standard recommends E. coli strain KO11 to be used for spiking for enteric bacteria. This is because as it is resistant to the antibiotic, it can be cultured easily and detected easily, suppressing the growth of other interfering bacteria from the sample. For the rest 3 categories, which is virus, helminth, and protozoa, there is no compulsive mandatory requirement for the strain. The third type of threshold requirement for human health parameter again is the field verification testing, wherein maximum concentration in solids and maximum concentration in liquids needs to be monitored and met as per table 13 in the standard, which is solid and liquid effluent field verification performance thresholds. Here, I would also like to point out that only 3 parameters needs to be tested in field, as the results of protozoa holds true for helminth as well. So these were the 3 requirements for testing and the thresholds. Let's understand the rationale behind these requirements. So bacteria, virus, helminth, and protozoa are the most common pathogen groups found in human waste, sludges, wastewater, posing risk to human health based on the epidemiological studies. Also, as no single indicator can present the overall risk covering all the microbial pathogens, that's why 4 categories are recommended. Concentration based on scientific studies work also considered by the scientific technical committee to come up with these thresholds. For example, if you see on the right hand side, where I have given an example of Androil et al., one of the studies, we can see that all the 4 microbial pathogens can be found in the range of 10 raised to 4 to 10 raised to 6 in sludges. And numerous such studies and data were considered by the technical committee for these thresholds and the concentrations. Surrogates are suggested keeping in view the relevance, safety of the testing staff, ease and cost of testing. These surrogates for all the 4 categories were also based on the scientific data at that time, as well as several international guidelines, including the US EPA. So here, without going into details, in brief, I would also like to highlight another approach used for log reduction value targets here, which was a systematic framework comprising of three main aspects. First being the baseline pathogen data, where the characterization of pathogens in different source waters is considered. Secondly, exposure model, where the risk to human health upon exposure is considered through models. And the last and the most important is the dose response function, which helps to calculate the probability of infection due to those numbers and exposures. And based on this, the risk of infection is considered. And if there is a risk of infection, then yes, health protective pathogen targets were considered for this standard. This is also called as quantitative microbial risk assessment, which helps to come out and derive the risk-based pathogen targets. This is applied by WHO for waste safety management. Along with this QMRA, I would also like to highlight that the technical committee also considered field studies where comparing the performance of removal of surrogates and the pathogen categories were also compared and studied from different treatment technologies. So here you can see with disinfection and without disinfection, how the surrogates and the pathogens behave. So such studies were also considered for coming up with these log reduction values. With that, I think now we understand what were the rationale behind these thresholds and the numbers. Let's now understand where, when, and how to test for these human health parameters. So there are two places where we need to do testing for these parameters. One is in the control testing laboratory, where bacteria, virus, protozoa, and helminth needs to be tested. And second is the field verification of performance, where once the NSS is installed into the field, we need to test bacteria, virus, and protozoa. As I already told, in the field, the results of protozoa holds true for helminth performance as well. So let's move on when to test for these parameters. In the standard, table 3 shows a detailed sequence of all the different types of testing requirements. The yellow ones are the human health testing requirements. And here you will see that the table 3, the first row indicates the testing procedure, and the second column indicates the corresponding loading pattern for that particular day, whether it is normal or stress. So for the human health parameters, there are a total of 5 days to be tested for solid and output effluents. One day 6 is for diarrhea, and another day 31 is for the stress conditions. This is in order to check the consistency of results and the performance of treatment technology under different challenges or stress. So this was for control lab testing. Now moving on to the field lab testing. Field lab testing, the human health parameters will depend on the class of the NSS to be tested. So for class 1, which has where the NSS is based on non-biological treatment processes, human health parameters needs to be tested weekly for a period of 1 month. However, for class 2 and class 3, which is NSS systems based on the biological treatment process, like for example, composting or something, human health parameters needs to be tested for a period of minimum of 5 months, and the sampling is done every month. To ensure the representative and accurate results, the standard also shares recommended test methods for solid output and effluent testing, and also suggests any internationally accepted and recognized methods to be used when conducting tests for the human health parameters. In table A3, you can see that for each of the 4 categories of pathogens, there are recommended test methods suggested. I would here like to point out certain differences between the control lab testing as well as the field lab testing consolidated here. So as you see for the first row, spiking needs to be done only in the control test lab testing and not in the field verification. This is keeping in view the safety and risk of exposure as the laboratory environment is contained and staff are well trained to handle these microbes. Secondly, for virus surrogate, we suggest MS2 coliphage for the control lab testing. However, for the field verification testing, somatic coliphage is suggested. This is because somatic coliphage is found more in higher numbers in the field samples than in MS2, and MS2 is more studied for the control lab testing and treatment processes. Here, I would also like to highlight that the recommended method for virus in table A3, there is a slight typo error. For MS2, it is ISO 10705 part 1, whereas for somatic coliphage, it should be read as part 2. This would go for correction in the revision for sure. And last and most importantly, helmet tests. So helmet test is again suggested for control lab testing and not for the field verification testing. So now let's move on to how to perform the spiking. So for spiking, the standard clearly states the use of E. coli strain KO11 for the bacterial category. However, for the rest three categories, the strains can be used as per the recommended test methods for testing. Also, detailed procedures for preparation of the input spike load for liquid and solid. Reference methods are suggested under table F1 for getting more detailed procedures on preparing the input spike. So let's move on to how to perform the sampling during the spiking. So ISO 3500 did not specify any particular sample numbers or sampling frequency for the discharge solid or liquid. Here, the reason is because it would depend on the NSS batch length. So for example, if the batch length is less than 24 hours, then all the batches which NSS can conduct, all the batches needs to be spiked and the output of all spiked batches needs to be sampled and tested. For system with batch length more than 24 hours, a single batch is spiked and output of the single batch is sampled and tested. For NSS systems with continuous process, residence time of the NSS plays important parameter here. And based on this parameter of resident time, which ensures that the output stream sampling corresponds to the input stream that has been spiked with the target microorganism. And in some NSS systems, the continuous process can be treated as the batch system with greater than 24 hours. And so a single batch needs to be spiked and output of that spiked batch needs to be tested and sampled. With that, I have shared with you the requirements, the rationale, the methods and procedures in ISO 3500 for human health parameters. Now let's move on to who could benefit from this standard and how it could be relevant to you. So standards can benefit for different stakeholders in different ways. For consumers and technology users, here the toilet users will experience direct benefits by having the guarantee of a reliable, safe system, thereby helping them to make informed choices and towards their purchase. For designers and manufacturers, this will provide a blueprint to be used in order to create a product that meets the international guideline requirements, thereby facilitating the easier market access as well as faster commercialization. For national bodies, as they are involved in policies and regulation, adoption of this standard will benefit policymakers to rely on global expert opinion to ensure safety of the products installed in their country and for the safety of their own citizens. As standards also drive innovation and facilitate cross-border trade, the potential investors would benefit from having reliable criteria for making proper investment decisions. With that, I have come to the end of my presentation for today. So in summary, I would like to share with you how Improvement in fecal sludge management is crucial to sustainable sanitation practices and thereby reduction in infectious diseases. And yes, standards can pave the way in a very proactive manner, thereby helping to induce the global acceptance for these innovative technologies. Now, since this approach is very generic, this standardization process can be rethought for any other global challenges we are facing. ISO 3500 is the first forward-looking standard on non-sewered sanitation, helping to reduce the risk from infectious diseases as it is based on three stringent criteria. One, it is having four major pathogen groups to be tested for and not on any single indicator. Secondly, log reduction values for all the four pathogen groups to be there for monitoring the safe disposal of human waste. And most importantly, the performance field monitoring, which is key to ensure that the treatment barriers are operating as intended once the NSS is installed in the field. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your time and attention. Here, I would also like to invite you to the part 3 of this webinar series, which is on environmental parameters and recommended methods by my colleague, Eileen. With that, I would like to hand over it to Meenal. Meenal, over to you.
The,
Hello.
we will now begin with our Q&A session with Dr. Kaushik. Here is the first question. Do we offer ISO 30500 certification trainings?
Yes, TÜVSÜD is interested in offering ISO 3500 trainings. And you can get in touch with us and we can provide more details on that.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Moving to the next question. Can we use other substitute strains for the mentioned parameters?
Yes, so as I said, that for E. coli alone, we have a mandatory requirement of using the strain KO11. But for the rest three parameters, you can use it as per the standard methods, and they should be the laboratory control standard strains which we use for testing. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushik, for answering that. Moving to the next question. Helminth is said to be equal to protozoa in the field verification of performance. Then, what is the need of it to be tested in controlled laboratory testing?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Helminth is said to be equal to protozoa in the field verification of performance. Then, what is the need of it to be tested in controlled laboratory testing?
Yes, so this is a very interesting question. The reason being that, as I said, that helminth infections are the most important infections in underdeveloped countries. So we need to test for these pathogens. And since in controlled environment of the laboratory with the trained staff, we can do it much better than in field samples, which is much difficult. So that's why this decision has been taken to put it under the control laboratory testing. Because as these parameters and infections are more prevalent, we definitely need to make sure that the treatment technology does clear it or remove it, at least in the control laboratory.
Thank you for answering that. The next question is, why is the recommended method for virus different for control lab testing and field verification testing?
Okay, so the field verification testing, we are recommending somatic coliphage. This is because somatic coliphages are more prevalent in sludges or fecal waste than MS2. However, MS2 is good and there are a lot of studies available or scientific data available on its as a model indicator for treatment technologies, like how close it behaves to the enteric viruses in the different disinfection treatment technologies. So for that reason, it is being recommended in control laboratory testing, and somatic coliphage is recommended in the field verification.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushik. Next question is there a reason why for human health only monthly testing is carried out in field testing instead of weekly testing for for like environmental parameters?
Okay, yeah, that's another interesting question. So, for environmental parameters, which are mostly the chemical parameters, they are easy to test, and the test results also doesn't take much time. However, for the microbiological parameters, you need technical expertise, and also they are more laborious and takes longer days for the results to come out. Also, most of the microbiological processes are longer than uh, the chemical processes in nature. So that's another reason.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushik. Here's another question. For why do you need to do the spiking?
Okay, so the spiking is required to be done because there could be situations like now in today's situation where during COVID, there could be a spike or increase in number of these pathogen or viruses being excreted in the human waste. So to make sure that the treatment technologies can handle these spikes and these certain conditions, we do the spiking in the control laboratory for these kind of worst case scenario.
Thank you for answering this. The next question is you have mentioned the challenges with using Ascaris egg. How do you overcome these challenges?
Okay, so currently we have very limited suppliers of Ascaris egg because we need viable Ascaris eggs, and I'm not having a full answer for it in terms of like what can we do. But if we can come out with easier techniques to isolate these helminth eggs from the source, as well as uh, techniques to detect them, because currently the helmet testing or Ascaris X testing requires a lot of technical expertise over many years, and it's very laborious. So if we can have easier techniques to isolate as well as to detect, then maybe there would be more and more suppliers uh, coming in place to provide these eggs.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushik, for answering that. The next question is do you face any challenges in procuring the surrogate pathogens? If so, how did you deal with it?
So for the three parameters, which are E. coli virus as well as protozoa, we do not face any challenges because most of them you can get from ATCC, and ATCC has a local distributor in most of the countries. So they can be easily procured. Only thing you need to keep in consideration is your local government regulations. But yes, as I just mentioned, helminth, because of the availability of limited supplies, is difficult to procure. Otherwise, there is no issue in procurement of these cultures.
Thank you for answering that. The next question is why is the recommended method for virus different for control lab testing and field verification testing?
Yeah, so as I mentioned just now, for the field verification, we test for the coliphage which is present more in the field samples or in human waste, which is somatic coliphage. And in the control laboratory testing, we test against a coliphage which is more well studied and has more scientific data to back on with respect to its similar response to treatment technologies than as enteric viruses. So that's why MS2 is recommended for the control lab testing, and somatic coliphage, which is more easier to detect in field sample and more easier to handle, as well as is prevalent in sewages, is recommended for the field testing.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushik. Here is the last question for the day. Why are the four parameters being chosen?
Okay, so as I mentioned, the four parameters represent the four major categories of pathogens which are found in fecal sludges, and these are the one uh, which have been linked to different diseases, gastrointestinal diseases or the fecal oral route diseases. So that's why we recommend these four categories, and the surrogates are chosen based on the ease of testing, the safety. So we cannot have only one single indicator, because no single indicator can uh, show the prevalence of all the other microbial pathogens. So that's why for each category we have one indicator.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kaushik, for your time. If you have any more questions, please write to us at your respective country's inquiry ID. We will answer them for you. You can also write to us on the same inquiry ID if you want to request for webinars about our offerings. I'm sure this webinar was interesting and relevant for all of you. Please do visit our website where you will get the latest news and updates on our services. Thank you once again for your time and have a good day.